6. Happy January. We are here for our Sexy First Friday episode for January. And I will just be waiting a minute for Lyndsey to join. We always like to start a couple minutes early because sometimes we have our tech issues and we have to start over. So hopefully this time we don't. Okay, I see Lyndsey's joined. Let's see if we can let her in. Just trying to let Lyndsey in now.
Hi, Sam. It worked.
I was getting nervous there.
You never know, right? Whether it will work or not work for us.
Well, hey, Lyndsey. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. I can't believe it's 2026 already.
I know. So we will just introduce ourselves as always in case someone is new here. If you're new here, I am Dr. Sam E Greenberg. I am a sexuality researcher and an Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. My research is on sexual desire and the Enneagram. And I always forget to say my type. I lead with type 5 and I'm a sexual dominant, so sexual instinct dominant.
Hi, my name is Lyndsey Fraser. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex therapist, an IEA accredited professional. I have a practice in South Minneapolis where I specialize in relationships and sexuality utilizing the Enneagram. And yes, we often forget to say what our types are. I am an Enneagram type 9 who leads with social.
Perfect. So today's topic we're super excited about is the relationship cycle. And I just wanted to say this is the first episode in our relationships basics series. So we do Enneagram and sexuality topics, the intersection of Enneagram and sexuality, but we're also branching out to do specifically a sexuality basics series, which we did in the fall. You can check that out at our YouTube or in our story highlights on Instagram. So we did a series of 3 sexuality basics topics, and now we're doing a series of 3 relationships basics topics, and then we'll be doing a series of 3 Enneagram basics topics. And that's just to kind of diversify, show you guys that we are experts in multiple topics, not just the intersection of Enneagram and sexuality, but also relationships as a whole. As you all know, Lyndsey is a marriage and family therapist, so she is very knowledgeable in therapeutic interventions as a whole, sexuality as a whole. I'm a sexuality researcher, not just Enneagram, so sexuality topics as a whole. So we're excited to dive in today with the relationship cycle. Starting with the kind of history of this topic. Lyndsey is the big expert in this one, so she's going to be talking more than me, but I did do a little bit of a dive just into the history of these concepts. So from what I can tell, the relationship cycle that Lyndsey's going to be talking about, while it has like kind of her own spin on it, it has its origins in the work of Elaine Hatfield, who developed the theory of passionate love and companionate love. Which are very aligned to some of the cycle pieces that Lyndsey's going to mention. I can talk more about that after. And also in Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love, which was positing that love is made of 3 components: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So you hear all those type of resonance of those in what Lyndsey talks about the different parts of the relationship. Take it away, Lyndsey.
Yes, what's really interesting about this model is that it was interesting. Like, I can't even remember, Sam, anymore who the actual originators of this particular theory were, because it's just something that most marriage and family therapists now get when they're sort of in that graduate school process, and many of us create our own little spins on it. I use a little bit different language than the originators do, just because it's fit me and my practice more. But if you know anything about marriage and family therapy, a lot of what it's a systemic look at therapy. And when you look at systemic things, what we're looking at are cycles and systems that clients get stuck in. So you've got communication cycles, you've got relational cycles, You've got family cycles. We've got all these cycles that we are in, and just how relationships themselves also sort of have these cycles. And even in life, right? If we look at life, life has its cycles. We have our seasons, we have the life cycle. And so really marriage and family therapy is really focused on the systemic view of cycles and systems and its impact on humans and relationships in particular. Social workers will also have a fairly similar way of training if you are in the social work field, though they tend to have a little bit more around social justice and some of those aspects of things as well. So my social workers oftentimes can really relate a lot to what marriage and family therapists do as well. I could go into a whole episode just on what marriage and family therapy is. But that being said, what we're looking at here is that there is a cycle that romantic relationships go through. And in this cycle, there are 4 parts of the cycle. The 4 parts are going to be the infatuation period, which is that beginning stage, that first 9 months to year and a half. Then you have repair and romantic connective love. And we'll talk a little bit about this because 3 of these you will continue to go through the rest of your life, and 1 of these will kind of drop off after that first 9 months to year and a half, which I'm sure you can kind of know which one I'm going to say that is, which is actually that infatuation cycle. Anything else that you wanted to say before I went into just a little bit about these particular parts of the cycle?
No, I think I just want to say we'll probably chat. We'll bring in a little bit of Enneagram perspective as regards each of these phases, although this episode is more focused on just the relationship basics.
So let's look at that. And if you saw, I did some little reels on these different cycles as well. So there's actually a reel for each one if you want to go back and watch those as well. But the first cycle is that infatuation cycle. And this is that cycle that is the first 9 months to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years if you're really lucky that you're going to be in that stage. And what's interesting about this particular stage is that we are actually creating chemicals at a higher level within the body when we have attraction and desire towards someone else. You're going to have some more dopamine, and dopamine is sort of your euphoria and reward chemical. You have norepinephrine, which is that racing heart and those flushing cheeks and that like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then later you're going to have oxytocin, or the cuddle hormone, that's produced at higher levels as well as we're falling in love. The interesting thing is these other 2 will drop off after the first 9 months to 2 years, but oxytocin, we continue to create, especially as the bonding, the connection, the relationship goes. It's interesting because it doesn't mean that we won't, sometimes people, when they come into my office, they're like, well, how do I get back to that infatuation period? The reality is we cannot go back to exactly how it feels when we first meet someone. Now, that being said, we can have moments of sort of that like racing hearts, or those butterflies, or that I look at you and I feel super excited. And Sam, I know, is going to talk a little bit because there's one instinct that loves this phase, and they're a little bit better than the other 2 on creating it again. And then it's going to, we're going to continue to kind of create that. But like with oxytocin, that creates safety and security. It's not great for passion, excitement, and desire. And one of the things that oftentimes we'll work with clients is like, as we get into longer term relationships, is one way is to kind of create a little bit more of this particular cycle is doing something a little bit different. So if you have been in a relationship for a long period of time and you want to have a little bit more of those chemicals being boosted into your system, go do something you've never done with your partner before. I always joke here, like, go take a yoga goat class, like, go take a cooking class together, do ballroom dancing. The things might not go well, but you're going to create something a little bit new and a little bit more exciting sort of within that as well. Why don't you add a little bit about how you see the infatuation period, Sam?
Sure. And just a quick clarification, maybe for anyone who's in the younger generation who's watching this. Is this what they call new relationship energy, Lyndsey, or the NRE?
Yes, it is. It
That's what
definitely
kids
is.
like to say,
Yes.
just to clarify that. And I will just add that I often see with couples who are doing a long distance relationship, sometimes this phase will be a little elongated because they're not seeing each other in person as much. So sometimes you see that draw it out a little longer if people aren't, together in the same geographical area. What I'll add some Enneagram perspective here. So if you know the instincts, we have the sexual instinct, the social instinct, and the self-preservation instinct within each Enneagram type. The sexual instinct not necessarily being the same as sex, but it has to do with that kind of passion and intensity. And our sexual dominant individuals absolutely love the infatuation phase. We love new relationship energy. It's kind of like our lifeblood. We want everything to feel like that all the time. And these are the people who are going to take it the hardest when that decreases. And it does decrease in everyone. Just biochemically, it does. Those hormones do decrease, as Lyndsey said. But we see our sexual dominance, especially if they're partnered with another sexual dominant, they're the ones who can keep it a little more going or a little bit more approximating it over the course of their relationship. And also, they're the ones who are going to feel most disappointed when it dies down. Now, our self-preservation dominant individuals, and especially our sexual repressed or sexual in the last position individuals, are going to actually feel some relief when that infatuation cycle dies down. They're going to feel like, okay, like that was fun. I don't really know anyone who sort of hates it. There's people who feel like it's overwhelming, and that would again be our sexual repressed people, and oftentimes our self-preservation dominant people feel it's a little overwhelming, it's a little much. No one's really like, I hate this usually, but when it dies down, those folks are like, oh, you know what? This feels better. It feels more predictable, even keel. Okay, like I can get on board a little bit more with that having died down. So that's all I'll say for now on the infatuation phase.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I was raising my hand because I'm a sexual instinct repressed person. And actually, I've done a lot of work on this. So there's actually some more desire for that kind of intensity and that experience. But earlier in my life, I would get so overwhelmed with the intensity of the experience that was happening and being like, oh, I can't wait till this. I love it, but I can't wait till this actually like things, calm down and kind of like even themselves out. And I couldn't like in the beginning when I was like learning about instincts and Enneagram, I couldn't believe that people wanted to live here all the time. I was so like mind blown. Like, why would you want to live there all the time? Like that is not an enjoyable experience. I mean, it's enjoyable, but you feel very out of control. And so it's a very interesting and insightful thing. And as I've done more work on my sexual instinct myself, it's been very interesting that I actually desire and want a little bit more of this energy sort of even in my own life where I wouldn't have in the past. And so I like how you shared that piece of it too, Sam.
So should we move to the disillusionment phase?
Yes, so the disillusionment phase is sort of where I say like the rose-colored glasses have come off. You now start to see your partner more holistically for who they are. This might be where you start to have more conflict and more like irritation or frustration with the partner. Now, I do want to keep in mind some people, more unhealthy relationship cycles, you might see more of that conflict and stuff happening sort of within the infatuation period. But what I'm going to say about that is like that sometimes can be like, okay, what's going on? Let's pay attention to that. But more often than not, you're not going to see a whole lot of that in more healthy relationship dynamics within the first 9 months to a year and a half. You're going to see more of that pop itself up sort of in that disillusionment phase. And that's a whole different thing that I'm not going to talk about today when you do see it earlier on. But that what you are going to see is that this is where you start to be like, gosh, I didn't realize this before and I was kind of okay with it, but my partner's always late. And that's kind of irritating. Or, God, they kind of like bite their nails or they chew and I can hear it and I don't like it. Or, they made a comment there and that actually kind of hurt me, or maybe I would have blown it off before, right? And so you start to have sort of this recognition of kind of like who the person is, more holistically. And you recognize that, all of us, as I will say, have our shadow and light components, right? We're not all light. We all do things that irritate our partners. Let's be honest. And this is sort of where that conflict stage kind of comes into play. And this is going to actually be where I see a lot of people get stuck. This is where couples come in to my office. They don't have necessarily the tools or the capacity or ability, or something big has happened and it's hard to kind of move through that and they need a little bit of help. But really what's happening in disillusionment is an opportunity for renegotiation of needs, wants, and desires, and kind of setting more of those limits and those boundaries and those expectations that we have. If couples do this well, we will move in, which is actually, I'm talking a little bit about repair, but like once you kind of move through this to actually trying to repair this, and if you do repair well, you can kind of move through that and continue to have sort of that relationship that you want. What would you add about that disillusionment phase, Sam?
I would say that no one is in love with this. I mean, I think all the Enneagram types, all the instincts kind of, it's a little difficult. I think you can get your more warrior types, like your sixes, and even your twos, like really kind of panic about it. Like, well, oh no, what's wrong? It used to feel really easy, now it's hard. But in general, that's the experience that all the types and all the instincts are going to have, is like, oh, it's kind of a drag. Like, it was nice before and now it's a little bit difficult. Whereas the like I said before, the self-preservation dominance and the sexual instinct in the last position, people are going to be like, okay, at least that like intense overwhelming thing has decreased, but they're going to have to kind of navigate through this a little bit of a rocky period to get to where they feel really good, which would be the later stages.
And then our next, it's interesting. I was actually just even thinking of just saying that like our Enneagram sevens might just pop out.
Oh, yes.
Or ones that don't want to deal with more unpleasant things or experiences. Like
I'm
my type.
so glad you mentioned that. I actually meant to mention nines as well. Sevens, you sometimes get, the serial monogamist. Of course, any type can be that, but you see it a lot with sevens. You see it a lot with sevens even in their jobs. Like they'll have, let's say, like 11 jobs in 10 years. It's because as soon as they hit this with a relationship or with anything, that new relationship energy or new experience energy wears down, the seven will cut and run. That's such a good point. And I do a lot of work to stay with this piece. And then yes, nines, while they wouldn't necessarily cut and run, not their style, they might really shy away and withdraw energetically from the conflict aspect of this.
We can be a little bit, what I will say is like maybe a little bit withholders of our presence. Um, some of those qualities of our nines, which I have been guilty of, I will say. Once we move through a disillusionment, we move into the repair stage. And the repair stage is where we're actually going to start to bring up some of these complaints that we have, start to ask for negotiations, ask for needs to be met. This is where having good communication skills is really important to be able to navigate through this. Actually, interestingly enough, next time we meet, we're going to be talking about communication skills, the nonviolent communication. So you're going to get some skills of what you would do in this particular place. We won't have time today, obviously, to go through all of that. But if you don't have those great communication skills, or you haven't learned those, and many of us don't get great communication or conflict management skills from our families of origins. And oftentimes we repeat sort of the things that we saw. And so a lot of couples can get stuck. And where I wanted to say this as well is like, it is okay if you get stuck. I did not know these things either until I became a therapist and I learned these skills. And I think most of us are trying the best that we can, but sometimes we can use criticism or defensiveness, or even if you know Gottman's the Four Horsemen, those kinds of things as well that can really make it difficult for us to move through and have that repair that we want. But what's beautiful is that if we do this particular phase effectively or stage, we can actually have more of what we need and want and desire in relationship in our partnerships as well. So it's a really important one, and it's a crucial one for the relationship to continue. If you can't get beyond this, this can sometimes be where relationship ends, or even you do have the skills to do it, but there's some recognition of like, you know what, I don't think I can love you the way you deserve to be loved, and nor can you love me the way that I deserve to be loved. And that's a really interesting thing that I will tell clients. Like, if you cannot love someone the way that they deserve and need to be loved, it is like you need to let them go and find somebody that can love them that way. Of course, breakups are painful, they hurt, but even in a really good repair stage, you sometimes can decide like, our relationship is done, but you can do it in a healthy way that helps both people feel not positive about it, but like, I felt heard, I felt understood, and we recognize that this relationship wasn't a good fit for either one of us. So this can be a really hard stage as well. Maybe not as hard as disillusionment, but it can be, it takes some skills, it takes some navigating, it takes some what I call functioning adults to show up, which all of us are not great at. We might want to use our functioning teen or a functioning child, or adaptive child and adaptive teen. Sorry, I said that the wrong way. If you're familiar with sort of PMLD's work as well, which I'm not an expert in, but I know I have lots of therapists that are experts in that area. But like, we can also show up in those places that make it really hard for us to have the repair we want. What would you add to this particular phase, Sam?
I think it just might be interesting to talk about how each of the instincts experiences a challenge with this. I think this is challenging for everyone. You know, disillusionment and repair can present challenges for everyone. Um, when I think about the sexual instinct at this stage, the part that's easy for the sexual instinct is the depth of this, is going to like, this is like ultimately me deep down, what I want, you know, vulnerability, my true self. That's really passionate. That's easy. But the staying with the kind of difficulty of hearing out these little nitty gritty things that the partner might have complaints about that are more kind of boring to you, these everyday habits and things that can be kind of difficult for a sexual instinct dominant person to sustain their attention for this repair phase. What do you think about for social?
I think for social dominance, when this is happening, you know, there can be, I mean, almost maybe some like, I want to keep the bond and the connection going. So there can almost be some like fawning behavior that might be happening from a social dominant, because it's sort of like, what do I need to do? How do I accommodate you? And it's interesting, like, obviously, as a 9 and a social dominant, you're going to see that more from me than you may see from some of the other types that are more assertive. But even in your assertive types that are social dominants, you're going to see a little bit of that sort of like, what do I need to do to keep the partner wanting to be connected to me, maybe not advocating or asserting or asking for what they need as much. And so that's one of the things I might see with social dominant.
And then I've already wanted to move to type, but I don't want to skip self-preservation dominant. So for self-preservation dominance, what do you think is sort of like what they do well or what's their challenge in this phase?
I think sometimes like the energy that goes into having to focus on resolving conflict and issues, like they don't want to deal with that. That feels like a lot. You know, especially if you have some more withdrawn types that are self-preservation dominants, you might see that even more. In particular, lower energy types like your 9 and your 5 and your 4, which are your withdrawal types too. So I guess I just kind of they're both. But I think there is, they might be more matter of fact, like what is the resolution? How do we need to move through this? They maybe have more comfortability with feelings and staying in the feelings that are also valid information. So those are some of the things that I would say. I mean, what they can do well is they can be very matter of fact, and they can be very quick to move on, especially if there is like, you know, I'm thinking more my 5 husband who's a self-preservation, evidence-based information to move on. But I think all self-preservation dominance, like if you sort of have, like, you know, like if things are like, they can move through things fairly quickly in this area if they know the information and they know where to go, and like it can be quick and easy fix.
Absolutely. I think when I see self-preservation sexual couples, which is a really common pair in this phase. One of the issues is that the sexual dominant is happy to go and spend an elongated amount of time kind of like digging in, laying everything out. But then again, with the more mundane things, they can kind of glaze over. And then the self preservation is like, what do we need to do to get through this? Boom, boom, boom. And the sexual dominance is like, no, we need to really go into it. So even within each of these phases, you have all these differences. I wanted to bring up our attachment types, 3, 6s, and 9s, who I think would be the more likely to do what you said, Lyndsey, and do more of the fawning, especially in the earlier cycles, because I think Lyndsey's going to tell you you'll go through cycles and cycles and cycles of this. In the early ones, you're going to see your 3, 6, and 9 maybe start to express things are not quite what I need and then pull it back. So you might see a 9 saying like, okay, I really actually need more alone time than I'm getting. And then the partner's like, oh, that really hurts my feelings. And like, oh, no, no, never mind. It's not that. I don't need that much. And then they'll pull it back until for years sometimes until the next big cycle of this comes around. So we see with some types struggling to express more their needs, and then we see some types over expressing. So there's all kinds of Enneagram dynamics we could go into that we don't have time to go into every single one.
Yeah, I completely agree with all the things you're saying there, Sam. Well, let's move into our romantic connective love stage. This is like actually one of my favorite stages. And I wonder if partially that's because I'm a social dominant. Now that I said that. This is where you get that resolution of the conflicts. You feel seen by your partner. And now you remember why you're with them. You feel secure. You feel warmth. You will still feel butterflies sometimes, but it's not the intensity of butterflies that you saw in the beginning. It's sort of like you glance at your partner, and I'm like, oh, little flutters. I know why I'm with you again, right? And again, I think that, like Sam said, a sexual instinct dominant might be able to create bigger butterflies than maybe a social dominant or self-preservation dominant does, but it isn't as intense as that beginning stage of infatuation, but it's sort of that like more of an oxytocin chemical of like, we're bonded, we're connected, we're close. I know that I can count on you. And then what's really interesting sort of about all of these, before I talk about what happens with the stages, anything you would add for the romantic connective stage, Sam?
I think this is the one that was called in Elaine Hatfield's work companionate love rather than passionate love. Not to say that there's no passion. So I think certainly there can be passion in this phase. But like Lyndsey said a few times, you're not going to go back ever to the complete new relationship energy thing that you have at the beginning. It's going to be a little bit of a different feel. And that this is the phase that can last, quite a long time, until you get kind of kicked back into disillusionment by something that happens.
So then when we think about this, this is a cycle, right? So what does that cycle look like? And so what happens then is after you go through romantic connective love, you will skip over the infatuation phase. You never go back to that particular phase, which is the beginning of the cycle, but you go to disillusionment again, then you'll have to go through repair, and then you'll have to go to romantic connective love. And the reality is you will go through those 3 cycles the rest of your life with any partner that you're with. So and I think what's great about the recognition of that, especially when I share with clients, it's like they can be like, we're just in a disillusionment phase. Like we can get back to romantic connective love. Like it almost helps people recognize like we're not doomed, we're not stuck here. It doesn't mean that the relationship is over, that there are cycles and systems to how relationships work, and we can't be in the lovey-dovey rainbows and butterflies phase forever. I wish we could. That would be wonderful. I'd want that too. But we can't, unfortunately. And that you'll kind of keep, and sometimes people ask me, like, are there specific links on these particular cycles? And no, there's not. You could go through it quickly in a day. You could be stuck in disillusionment for months or years. and then move into it. So there isn't like there's a particular, you could be in romantic connective love for a long time. There isn't a particular amount of time that you are going to spend in each cycle or phase, right? That part of it is that will look different for everybody else. It will look different too, like what's happening in the disillusionment period. Is this like a little bit of irritation because I didn't like how you loaded the dishwasher today? Or is there some other sort of bigger issue or concern that we're navigating? Maybe it's constant conflict. Some of those constant conflicts that I have might be introversion and extroversion, internal processor, external processor. It's one of these things that will continue to present itself over and over again, and sometimes when that conflict presents itself again, you might be stuck in it longer than a little irritation around I didn't like your tone of voice, and again, it depends on how you respond, right? We're going to talk about communication skills next time, but it's like, if I didn't like a partner's tone of voice and I started like criticizing them or telling them they were stupid, like it's going to be harder, right? Versus like, using something more like nonviolent communication where I'm talking about like how that particular action or behavior is affecting my well-being, we're going to have different types of responses and more effectiveness in moving through sort of the disillusionment and repair phase. But there is not a particular amount of time that you spend in any of these phases.
I want to add there's differences as regards the cyclical nature of relationships, also by Enneagram type and instinct. And we don't have time to go into it, but one example is that our self-preservation dominants are actually the best at understanding that relationships go through this cycle, that go through ups and downs. If we're in a down, we're in a disillusionment period. I know that we're going to be okay, probably, that we're going to get back and sort of not panicking about it. And our sexual instinct dominants are the worst at this. So as soon as something is wrong, as soon as we hit disillusionment, we're like, oh no, I miss that perfect feeling of like everything being connected and feeling good. Should I panic? So, and then socials can go either way, depending on kind of what the partner's doing, following their lead, depending on the type. So we see differences by Enneagram type and instinct for all of these phases, how comfortable we are with each phase, how we respond to each phase, our strengths and weaknesses within each phase, and then how we see the cycle overall. So obviously Enneagram affects basically everything. We got a comment, truth. Thanks. Well, it looks like we're at the end already. As always, it went super fast. If folks don't know, we have released our ebook in December, so it's pretty new. Um, Lyndsey, can you remind me how much we're selling that for? Because I don't remember. Is it
I think
37?
it's 37. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, it's
37.
37. We wanted to do like a little bit of a lower price point resource for folks who don't have time to come to our workshops or anything like that. So you can find details about that in our bios. We post about it. And we have, as always, our Enneagram for Enneagram and Sexuality for Transformed Relationships full day e-course that has CEUs for marriage and family therapists. You can find it at both our websites. What else we got going on, Lyndsey? What am I forgetting?
Just, always feel free to go and check out our YouTube channel as well, which is Sexuality, Relationships, and the Enneagram, or at Lyndsey Fraser. And interesting enough, we're doing more and more stuff there, and we plan to put more things there. Like we're, in 2026, we're contemplating different kinds of maybe like little tutorials or whatever else. We haven't fully decided yet what that is, but we do plan to have a little bit more of a presence there as well. So make sure you're following us over there. It's also a much easier way to find all of our Sexy First Fridays because they're just laid out by episode. And I know it can be difficult to find those like on Instagram by going into our highlights or having to go back and see when the actual video was. And so it's been a great resource for people to get easy access. Like, I want to watch the episode on instincts. Well, you can go back, and it's easier to find on YouTube than it might be able to find on Instagram. And then we also have our other workshops as well, or ones that we did in person that are also that were recorded, that are also for sale. So if you just want to learn about type, or if you just want to learn about instinct, those exist as well, and they're a little bit less expensive than the actual full day course. So don't hesitate to reach out to Sam and I. I actually see, like, I think one of the people there was actually at our instinct workshop that just responded, so that was awesome. And I think just, feel free to, and also, like, if there's topics or things you want to hear from us, don't hesitate to message us. We're always open to new ideas and places to go as well.
Perfect. And we will see you in February, first Friday of February for nonviolent communication, which is a really extremely useful strategy for relational communication. You're going to basically learn in any couples therapy or couples coaching. So that's a good one to not miss. And stay tuned for some things that Lyndsey and I are going to be getting up to in 2026 that we're excited about, but not quite ready to announce yet. Bye, Lyndsey. Happy January. Happy 26th.
Bye, Sam. So great to see you again. Thank you for everybody that came today.